right, welcome to Ghost Tales, another episode of Ghost Tales. I'm your host, Ashley Knight of Wavy 10. Welcome to the show. The show centers around places that are haunted, spooky encounters that people have had, and just interesting things about the paranormal. Here with me today is our guest, Aaron Whittington. He's with Fort Monroe up in Hampton. Hello, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and so you are the director of venues, events, and media production at Fort Monroe.
That's right.
That's a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
We do a lot in my department. So,
Talk about your role with Fort Monroe.
well, I've been at Fort Monroe for almost 11 years. In June, it'll be 11 years. And we started out as just the events department, doing special events, the large public scale programming, things like 4th of July and our Ghost Walk, which we're going to talk about today, and our holiday programming, those types of things. And it expanded out. And we currently have 6 or 7 different venues that we manage for private events and some public events. We manage all the outdoor space for other public events like the Ska Festival and stuff like that. Cool. And then we also run all of the media production at Fort Monroe. So we do the live streaming, we do the videos that you see, our Discover Fort Monroe series that comes out every Friday. All of that gets produced through our offices. So
very cool.
Yeah, we are busy people.
Now, you say there are several different venues. There's the National Monument. Talk about the others real quick.
Okay, so the Fort Monroe National Monument is the National Park Service presence at Fort Monroe, and they're the second largest landowner at Fort Monroe. So the land is owned by the Commonwealth of Virginia, the National Park Service, and so the Commonwealth of Virginia owns the majority of the property, and the National Park Service owns the second largest. Our venues, specifically, we have the Commanding General's Residence, which is a large, stately, traditional home at Fort Monroe that we use for wedding venues, or a wedding venue. We use for meetings and receptions and all kinds of different things. Our traditional wedding venue at Fort Monroe is the bandstand. There have been hundreds of people who, over the years, have gotten married at the bandstand in Continental Park, right there on the water, in the shadow of the Chamberlain Hotel on the Chesapeake Bay. It's a beautiful, beautiful venue for a wedding. Yeah. We also manage the Fort Monroe Theater. We have a small, what I would call like a business suite that we use for different events. It could be used for pretty much anything that you want, but we promote it as kind of a conference and event center, a small conference and event center. We can probably host, 150, 200 people for a meeting or a conference or something like that in there. Yeah. And then some other spotted venues around, but we also manage the open spaces. So we have Patton Street Park, which is our public festival area. That's where we'll host 4th of July this year. The Supernova Ska Festival that occurs in September is in that space. And we've done various other festivals in that space over the years.
Neat. Yeah, it seems to be a lot going on at this place. How long have you been there again?
I've been there 11 years.
11 years.
Yeah.
So you've seen a lot happen over there. Has it grown very much over those 11 years?
Oh, it's exponentially. It's more and more and more all the time happen at Fort Monroe. Just the amount of events and the increase in the population of residents, the increase in businesses that we have, the people who come out and attend things and come out the people who come out almost on a regular basis just to walk or go to the beach or go to the Ouzelfinch or the Dead Rise or the Coffee House or Paradise Ocean Club or any of those different private businesses. It's amazing how many people just come out to enjoy Fort Monroe on a daily basis.
That's so neat. See, I've only lived here about maybe almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in September, and I've not yet been up to Fort Monroe.
You got to get out there.
So I need to get up there.
We got a lot of stuff.
It sounds a lot of fun. Yeah,
it is.
Love it. I love it. And supposedly, it's haunted.
It is. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, it's haunted.
We're getting to the crux of the issue here.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about just a couple stories that you've heard from, is this from people who have visited the area or who have specifically gone on the ghost walks?
So it's all of the above and a little bit of everything. Okay. It's I have been writing and producing the Ghost Walk at Fort Monroe since the first year I got there. And I go around to our current residents or whoever will share, and I will say, have you seen anything? Have you heard anything? What are your experiences at Fort Monroe? And people will happily tell you. They want you to know their ghost story. They want you to know what their experience was. And I take those and I build them into a logical order that tours people around the fort each year. And we go in and out of some of the spaces that you don't normally go into. Might be a home, it might be a part of the casemate, whether it's the museum or another section of the fort or something like that. But we like to take people inside. And we share the stories. And I think what really makes it unique is we share the story that occurs in those spaces, and tell the history of those spaces.
Just to give them a lot of goosebumps.
Oh, yeah. But all the stories come from all kinds of different people, and whether they've been residents or visitors. Yeah.
And these are stories that you've actually gleaned from. These are actual stories. These are not made up. This is not just, some fanciful, oh, they say on a moonlit night, this can happen, that kind of thing.
Right.
This is actually what people have experienced on the property.
Yeah. So when I talk to them, they believe what they're telling me. And one of the best examples that I have of that is, this has been many years ago now. I was talking to folks and they said, Aaron, you got to go talk to this young man that lives in this house over here, but you need to go today because they're moving out. They're going to leave Fort Monroe. They've been transferred and they're going somewhere else. And I said, okay. So I went and I knocked on their door. And
now, first of all, when you go, do you take anything to record them with, or you just go to listen to their story?
It depends. So a lot of people will stop me, or if we're just at an event or something and somebody says, hey, Aaron, I have a story for you. I'll write it down, jot it down. But what I try to do is record them so I have their version. So it becomes an oral history. It becomes them, and keep a record of that.
Yeah, that's so neat.
So I did. I took a recorder and I went and knocked on this person's door. And I said, hi, I know you're in the process of moving, but I hear your son has a pretty good ghost story. And she said, yeah. I said, do you think you'd be willing to share? She said, yeah, I think so. So we went in and I sat down at this dining room table and I said, do you want to tell me your story? He said, yeah. And he was kind of a little shy to start with, but his mom said, just tell it the way you tell it.
How old was he?
He was 11 at the time.
Wow.
So this was
So that's young.
It was very young.
So no wonder he was kind of a little hesitant to kind of tell this story, because he's a little spooked out by it probably still.
Yeah. And you could tell it made him nervous to tell it. And that was one thing that really...
that made you know it's a good story.
Made me know it was a good story, but that's how you know they believe it too,
Yeah.
is how nervous they get.
All right, I'm going to stop you right there. We're going to stop for a quick commercial break, and we'll hear that story when we come back.
Great.
Welcome back to Ghost Tales. I'm your host, Ashley Knight. We've got Aaron Whittington with us from Fort Monroe, telling us about an 11-year-old boy who you started talking to. So you go around to people and you kind of gather their ghost stories that they've experienced while on the property. So you went to this 11-year-old boy and first asked his mom, is it okay? She said, yes, I think he's okay with telling it. So you went in, you started talking to him, and he was a little hesitant at first.
He was.
So talk about what he said when he finally started kind of getting going.
So we sat down at the dining room table, and he starts telling me his story, and he starts getting into a rhythm, and he's just telling his story now. And what he tells me is, he says, so I was upstairs and I was in the restroom. We were going somewhere. It was middle of the day, and I had been in and taken a shower, and I had gone from there to my bedroom to get ready, and I went back to the bathroom to finish getting ready. And when I got to the bathroom, I looked, as I turned to go into the bathroom, there was a man standing in the bathroom, standing at the far end of the bathroom, and he was just standing there. And he had on like a black suit with a bow-like tie around his neck, and he was an older man. And he called for his mom. He said, Mom, come, there's somebody in the bathroom. There's somebody in the bathroom.
The little boy did.
Yes.
Okay.
And he stood
Because that'd
at the
be a little
doorway
unusual for
the ghost to go, hey, there's a little boy staring at me in the bathroom. No, the boy is calling for his mom to come. And she came, she was downstairs and she came up the stairs, and she said, as she got to he said, as she got to the door, he watched as the man burst into pieces and faded into the wall. Generally, I would say, okay, this is a pretty cool story. This is a nice story. Yeah. But as I started out, he believed it. He knew what he saw, and he was not making this story up. And that's the experience that I have when I go and talk to people. It doesn't matter what I believe, and it doesn't
Mhm.
matter what other people believe. If think there's a real such thing as ghosts or these things, a lot of these people are very genuine. And when they say, this is what I saw, you can sense a mood shift in them. And they're not telling this for entertainment purposes from the
Mhm.
get go. They're sharing a story and an experience
An
that they've
experience,
had.
yeah. So where his house where he lived,
Mhm.
it was on the property?
It is. So all of
Fort
these,
Monroe.
this
We
is
should have
what
said that
makes
in the
us,
beginning, I
yeah.
think. Yeah. Yeah.
All of the stories that we have and that we share in our ghost walk and that we have collected over the years are at Fort Monroe.
Mhm.
And I think that's what makes our ghost walk and our experience at Fort Monroe different from others, is that when we take you to a space and we're standing there and we're telling you the stories, 95% of the time, it's the story that occurred in that house or in
In that
that
space.
space.
Mhm.
And 100% of the time, it's a story that occurred at Fort Monroe. It's not, we're not pulling from, Williamsburg or over in Hampton or Phoebus or somewhere like that. These are stories that occur right there on that property.
It's that location.
And so you're right there.
Did he have any other experiences, or was that kind of just what he experienced?
He didn't. That was his individual experience, and that was the story that he had to share.
And how old was he when that happened?
He was 11. It had happened
in
that
the
year.
short,
Yeah.
okay. So it was pretty recent
Oh yes.
that he was sharing.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, what's another? Well, let's talk about this. From research, there seems to be a lady in white that haunts the National Monument that I've read a lot about. Talk about what people are saying about this. Is it a Civil War era woman they're talking about, this lady in white?
Allegedly.
Allegedly, yes.
Yes. So we do have our famous lady in white, and she's probably one of our most famous ghosts at Fort Monroe that we have that still kind of lingers around. And every now and then you'll have somebody that says, I saw her. And I was like, okay, well, good. All right,
Wow.
tell me what you saw. So the origin story of the lady in white is there was a woman who was married to an older colonel, and they lived inside the fortress itself. So we have, the houses that are outside the moat, and then we have some that are inside, and they lived
Okay.
inside the fortress. And he was stationed there at Fort Monroe, and they were married, and he would often get sent away, like he would have to go to Richmond or to Williamsburg or other places. And she developed a fondness for a younger soldier at the fort, and they developed a relationship. So when her
So one of these
husband,
times that he was away.
one of these times that he
Okay.
was away, they had an encounter, and the husband actually came home early and caught them. And as the story goes, the husband ended up shooting the younger soldier. And it's rumored that the lady in white still lingers at Fort Monroe, waiting for her true love to show back up.
Waiting for the younger soldier
Yeah.
to come around.
That's,
Do we know how she died?
No, we don't.
We don't.
We don't.
We just know that she is perpetually wandering the grounds.
That's right. And I have talked to several people who have seen her. She's mostly seen on Matthews Lane, which is also called Ghost Alley. It's inside the fort. It's kind of runs behind a row of houses across from the Casemate Museum. I talked to a woman who worked in the chapel center for a long, long time, and she said on a regular basis that maybe 6 or 7 times in the time that she worked there, she would walk out of the chapel center and the lady in white would be standing in the road or walking down the road, and she would see her in that area. People have seen her on porches. People have seen her just kind of in all kinds of different places around the fort. So,
Wow.
yeah,
So kind of just hanging out.
just hanging out,
Everywhere.
just waiting for her love to return. It's
That's
the
so creepy.
way it goes.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Okay, so talk about another story that you've collected from your travels, from your going to interview these people.
Oh goodness, I had a gentleman one time tell me a story. So we have a lot of people who vanish into the fog and the mist, and are late in the fall and early in the spring when the water and the air temperature are different. We get really heavy fog out there, and so we get a lot of those different stories. And this gentleman lived on General's Row, right on the waterfront, but the driveway's running behind that house, is running behind those houses there. And he got in his car and he was going to work one morning and he pulled up to a stop sign and he was going to turn right. And he noticed there was a woman who was riding her bicycle on the sidewalk, and he thought that was a little bit odd because she was up on the sidewalk. And then he looked at her a little bit more, and she had on a dress, like a full-length dress, and she was riding along on her bicycle, and he thought that was a little bit strange. So he let her cross in front of him, and she stayed on the sidewalk, and he kind of pulled out, and he said she got about 2 buildings down, maybe halfway between, the 3rd and 4th building, and she just vanished right off the sidewalk. He said she just completely vanished off the sidewalk, and he never saw her again.
Wow.
And it's small little encounters like that all over Fort Monroe that just...
So I've never experienced a paranormal activity of any kind. When they see these figures, are they like fully embodied? Do they think they're an actual, because it sounded like he thought it was an actual real person, or are they just kind of foggy, or are they kind of a little shadowy, or he actually thought that this was a real person?
Yeah, so
it
some of them...
it obviously looked like an actual person, like fully formed. And
yeah, so some of them, the tales that I'm told, they really do come across as I was looking at a person and then this person vanished, like the little boy and the man in the bathroom, or like this guy and the lady on the bike. Lady in White kind of tends to appear kind of at a hazy distance, but very obviously the shape of a woman in a white dress, maybe like no feet, just kind of hovering and just kind of vanishes. The same woman that saw the lady in white a few times would describe, she would come out of the Casemate Museum and see like groups of soldiers walking down the road and up the ramparts, and just kind of in an apparition more form than like full all out, these look like people. So, yeah.
Okay, now quickly explain why it's called Ghost Alley, because I heard you mention that before. Why particularly that area is called Ghost Alley?
For a long, long time, it was one of the most haunted sections of Fort Monroe. So that's where people would see the lady in white. They would see some soldiers. The houses on the front side of Ghost Alley, there's several accounts from all 3 of those residences that people have told me over the years. Stories of Edgar Allan Poe and stories of Verena Davis, who was Jefferson Davis's wife. And then there's stories on the backside from the houses that back up to the alley as well. So just all kinds of different encounters right in that concentrated area.
Okay. All right. I'm going to stop you right there. We're going to take another commercial break, and we'll be right back talking about more about Ghost Alley.
Awesome.
Okay, we are back with Ghost Tales. I'm your host, Ashley Knight. We're here with Aaron Whittington, who is from Fort Monroe. Thank you again for joining us.
You're welcome.
Oh my goodness. So you mentioned a name right before we went to commercial break, which I absolutely love. You mentioned Edgar Allan Poe.
I did.
So he was stationed at Fort Monroe. We know this.
Yes.
And so have there been encounters where people have seen or claimed to have seen Edgar Allan Poe?
There have been encounters of people claiming to see Edgar Allan Poe. And so he was stationed at Fort Monroe. And after he was discharged from the Army, he returned to Fort Monroe on a couple of occasions. And it's said that Fort Monroe and the brickwork and stonework is some of his inspiration for the fall of the House of Usher and some of the stuff that he used in there. And but he has been seen. So one of the stories that I've been told, and one of the stories that we tell at Fort Monroe, is there was a young man who lived at Fort Monroe across the street from the Casemate Museum. And he kept telling his mom, he was really, really young. And I heard this story 2nd or 3rd person, so I didn't actually talk to this young man.
Okay.
But he kept telling his mom over and over again, Mommy, there's a man in my closet. When I go to bed at night, there's a man in my closet.
Oh
and
my gosh.
he was young enough at the time that mom writes it off as,
Right.
okay, this is just him.
He's not
There's a
yeah.
monster in the closet, and we're
Right.
going to shine the light in there and be over it.
Mhm.
And he kept saying, no, there's a man in my closet. Well, they had some friends that came to visit, and this is, maybe a year or so later, after he had started telling her this. And for fun and to do something interesting, they took them into the Casemate Museum. And at the time, there was a Edgar Allan Poe exhibit, and there was a poster on the wall, and the way the poster hung, the image of Edgar Allan Poe, which was kind of a hand-drawn ghostly image of him that was on this in this exhibit, was kind of right at kid level, maybe
Okay.
3-4 feet off the ground. And he goes to his mom and he says, Mommy, that's the man that's in my closet. And so that's how that's one of our Edgar
Oh my
Allan Poe
goodness.
stories. And there are other people who have seen him in their hallways and things like that. But
Wow.
that
Was
was very specific. It was way too specific for
is
it
there
not to
something
be.
significant about where that house is, where he was in?
No, no,
Okay.
there
So it
really
wasn't like a
isn't.
location where Edgar Allan Poe had lived before or anything like that. We just know he came back to Fort Monroe several times after he was discharged and kind of was familiar with the area. So we're assuming that's kind of why people are seeing him.
That's what I have to assume, because
Yeah.
my understanding is that in his time at Fort Monroe, Edgar Allan Poe would have actually lived in the barracks.
Mm.
Now we have a house at Fort Monroe that's named the Perry House, which is Perry is Edgar Allan Poe's real name.
Right.
But that house was actually built after his death, so he would have never have
had any
stayed there.
connection there.
And kind of the same type of thing. So he definitely has some sort of presence. He has some sort of presence at Fort Monroe, but can't really tie it to one specific place or instance. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Do you have you thought about maybe having readings of Edgar Allan Poe, like somebody maybe like Dickens does? His great grandson goes around and recites Christmas Carol. Have you thought about having someone like that for Edgar Allan Poe?
We have. There have been other programs in the past where we have had Edgar Allan Poe readings and talkback sessions, but be looking for something like that around January, around Edgar Allan Poe's birthday at Fort Monroe.
Yes.
And we're going to try and come up with a program or an afternoon of readings or something that we can do at Fort Monroe. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Oh, I'm geeking out now. All right, so talk a little bit about the Ghost Walk that you've got, where history meets mystery, which I love. That's such a clever name. Talk about when that starts up and how quickly people should sign up for that if they want to get in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. The Ghost Walk at Fort Monroe is one of our most popular events of the year, as you can imagine. It occurs around the fourth weekend of October, and it kind of depends on when Halloween falls. But we start our advertising and we start our ticket sales in mid-September. And this event sells out every year. It's time ticketed entry. We have limited capacity on it. It's all kind of volunteer run. So I only have 3 staff members and we put it together and do those things. But all of our tour guides, all of our characters that you encounter, all of our help is all volunteer run all through the weekend. So we occasionally are looking for volunteers to help out with that. So you can look out. If you want to be a volunteer, you can come out.
Yeah.
Get the
Well, I
inside
might be a
track.
little too scared to do that. And how many nights is it?
It's 3 nights. It's
3
Friday,
nights.
Saturday, and Sunday.
Okay.
Um,
And so people can start buying tickets for that in September.
in September, yeah.
They just need to keep an eye on when they open up.
That's
When
right.
the sales open up.
And you can find that. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram. You can always check out our website at fortmonroe.org. On Facebook,
FortMonroe.org.
we're Fort Monroe at Old Point Comfort. And on Instagram, we're The Fort Monroe. So,
The Fort Monroe.
Yep.
Any underscore dash?
Nope.
Just The Fort Monroe.
yep, that's
Okay.
it.
All righty. Well, that sounds so much fun. All right. So if you want to get in on that, do it right away. Well, as soon as the ticket sales open.
Yeah.
To get in on that, it sounds like a really super neat, fun time, fun weekend. Are you instrumental in that? You go around with them?
Absolutely. So I'm kind of behind the scenes. Every now and then you'll catch me leading a tour if we've had a volunteer drop out or something like that. But
Okay.
I'm absolutely there and I'm absolutely going around.
Awesome. So come see Aaron.
Yes, please do. Come see me.
All right. So go check out Fort Monroe if you haven't already. I need to get up there and let us know if you see some paranormal activity when you go. Write us in and let us know. And maybe we'll have you on the show talking about it, or write to us and we'll read your story on the air.
And if you've had your own story, send it to me. I want to know.
Yes, send it to Aaron. Absolutely. All right. So thank you so much for joining us. We've loved having you here, Aaron.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
So much fun learning about Fort Monroe, and I'm going to get up there sooner than later.
Come on.
So, all right. Thank you for joining us here at Ghost Tales, and we're going to scare you up another episode soon. So stay tuned.